Kick things off with our team, Antwan Lewis and Duarte Geraldino, live with the big story at 5.
The big headline that is undeniable after all these months, this trial, that we have a verdict, 50 months in prison for Sean Diddy Combs. Antwan, you've been covering this all day. The tension was so high.
It was.
What do you think about this?
Well, absolutely. We were shocked and, if you will, surprised because the recommendation, Combs was convicted in July, found guilty of the lesser of the two of the 4 charges. So we're talking about the Mann Act, transportation to engage in prostitution. And that carried a maximum of 10. So he was looking potentially at 20 years. But the fact that 50 months came in and he's already got time served is figuring in. So we're now talking somewhere less than 4, and then that would then determine where he would go from there. But the fact of the matter is that the judge also this morning talked to him about, talked to Combs, feeling that Combs had not expressed any remorse, for his actions of the 2 charges that he was convicted of. So when Combs took the stand, what was it, around 4 o'clock or so this afternoon, among the first things he had to do was try to address that matter. And we know that when he was on the stand that he cried, he took it, what were the words that he'd use? He was disgusted, shameful, and sick by his actions, leading up to all of this, and of course the casting video and all of that. So at some point the judge, who had the choice of either giving him the max of 20, or following the Department of Probation's recommendations of somewhere between 6 to maybe 7, just over 7 years, there. But the judge did admonish Combs, him, that he didn't feel that he brought in enough, to validate, like that. And he also had to take into consideration the impact to the public, when making this decision.
We also know that he was also fined $500,000, $250,000 for each of those counts for which he was convicted. But 4 years after all of this, it would seem like this is an extraordinary victory for his defense team, even though he is still going to be behind bars for several years to come.
Right. You were talking to Arthur earlier, Arthur Idala, we bring Arthur in now, Arthur, just to weigh in on the fact about the amount of time that was given and how that's interpreted from your perspective, being, a criminal defense attorney.
So as someone who practices in this courthouse, if I was one of Sean Combs' supporters out here, when I heard the number 50 months, I would have been yelling and screaming the way they were yelling and screaming at the verdict. And I'm being sincere, because in this courthouse, the judges typically are known as being of handing down pretty heavy sentences. And this is not a heavy sentence, all things considered. He's facing 20. They wanted 11. Probation has 7. And he goes and cuts probation by at least a third, pardon me for the math, and he's already got 14 months out of the 50 in, which probably counts as like 16, almost 17 months, and then 50 won't really be 50, it'll probably be like 43 or 44. Where he started the day he surrendered and where he is today, he's got to be breathing a sigh of relief, even though I'm sure he's very disappointed. I'm sure he really wanted to come out here and be interviewed by you guys today. But, I can tell you this, as someone who's been here a long time, there are other judges in this courthouse. This would not have been the sentence. There's no way they would have gone below the probation recommendation of 7 years. So the defense team deserves an enormous amount of credit. Mr. Combs deserves a lot of credit for the letter he wrote last night and speaking to the judge today. And the judge, look, he's obviously took all of this into consideration. You're talking about a judge who's a rookie as a judge, but not a rookie as a lawyer. He clerked in the United States Supreme Court. He was a prosecutor. He was in private practice. He took a huge pay cut to come on the bench. His heart is in the right place. He's intelligent. He was empathetic to Sean Combs, saying, you and your family are going to get through this.
It sounds like you're saying he was fair.
He was fair. He was more than fair. I will tell you, he was fair, leaning towards lenient towards Sean Combs. One of the factors that any judge in federal court sentencing by law has to take into consideration is deterrence, general deterrence. Besides specific deterrence, saying, Mr. Combs, I need to punish you so that you don't do this again. I also need to punish you so that the whole world knows, because the whole world is watching, if you do these acts, there's going to be severe consequences. And that's where a judge can kind of lean in to a heavier sentence. The judge didn't do this. He started off saying, I think there needs to be a significant sentence. And I was like, uh-oh, he's in trouble. 50 months here, of course. anyone who goes to jail, you don't understand, 1 day in jail is horrible. 1 day in jail is horrible. People telling you when you can go to the bathroom, when you can eat, when you can sleep. The lights are on all the time. I mean, it's not a place that you want. I visit prison, and I can't wait to get out of there, knowing I'm going to leave. So Sean Combs and his defense team should be breathing a sigh of relief.
So he got 50 months, and in the same breath, the judge says to his victims, "We hear you." Do you think he heard them? What do you think the reaction to the people who were victimized? That video is so difficult to get out of anyone's mind who has ever seen it. Did the judge hear them?
I think he did. I think if that video didn't exist, he may have gotten less. Look, the Mann Act is a crime that wasn't even prosecuted until lately.
Get further perspective. The Mann Act basically involves going to like a brothel or where there's
over
some
state
sort of
line
commercial.
But it's got to be over state lines.
Over state lines.
Right.
It usually involves some sort of commercial aspect, meaning like paying for a service or something like that. Correct?
Yeah. So they talked about doing it with our governor, Elliot Spitzer. Mm-hmm. They talked about doing it with my former client and now very good friend Lawrence Taylor, the New York Giant player. But when they called me about Lawrence Taylor, I said, "You're going to bring a Mann Act charge because he went to New Jersey and got a prostitute?" I go, "You guys haven't done it in 100 years." But lately, that was 15 years ago. Lately, they have been looking at the Mann Act and bringing some case. And there was one case where someone did get significantly sentenced, and that's what the prosecutor leaned on today. That we do, Judge, we could show you there is a precedent to sending someone to jail for 20 years. But they were exigent circumstances here. The judge did not fall for that. If the video didn't exist, I don't even know. Sean may have even gotten a lighter sentence.
So speaking about that video and a lot of the evidence, we know that he was acquitted of some of these charges, and yet that evidence was still taken into consideration when the judge came up with his sentencing. Talk about that.
The judge didn't do anything wrong. That is the law. I don't agree with it. I was involved in a case where there was in this courthouse, and it was a homicide case, and he was found not guilty of the homicide, but guilty of some lesser drug charges, and the judge banged the heck out of him on the lesser drug charges because I heard the evidence about the homicide, and even though the jury didn't believe it, I'm taking it into consideration. To some degree, that's what happened here. To some degree, it's part of the rules we live by. The judge is allowed to take your whole life into consideration, everything about you. And look, the defense wanted them to, right? The defense said, look at all his good acts. Look at the charter school. Look at the donations. Look at his children. Look at his mother. So the judge said, I can't just look at all the good stuff and not look at all the bad stuff. And he said that. The judge said, I have to take both sides into consideration. Again, when he said a significant jail sentence is in order here, I said out loud, walking to you guys, I was like, uh-oh, like this is going to be rough. 50 months under these circumstances. As I said, if I'm Mark Agnifilo, the lead lawyer, who's a friend of mine, I'd be opening up a good bottle of red wine tonight and say, I kind of saved the guy's life.
And to understand where he's going next, I'll be thinking, and you mentioned this before, what type of prison might he be going to?
Well, I'm sure Lisa, whoever's coming out to help us out, will be able to talk about what his lawyers asked for. The lawyers can ask the judge to make a recommendation, and I'm sure they know where they want. There's different facilities. Sometimes you ask to be close to your children. Sometimes you ask for a facility to be close to your older mother. So they'll make that determination. They'll take his security risk to himself. He's a target. So where are they going to put him to protect Sean, not to protect the inmates from Sean? And then ultimately the Bureau of Prisons will make that decision, and he'll have a much better life than he's had the last year at the MDC.
Thank you so much. You want to toss it back to the studio for some more information?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we just want to interject here because we've got Lisa Evers, who's on the phone right now. She spent the entire day inside the courtroom and can really paint a picture of what Diddy did the moment that he found out his fate.
Natasha, I'm just about at our camera over here. He was completely motionless when the judge read that sentence that it would be 50 months. That's 4 years and 2 months, and that also 5 years supervised release after that. I just got over to the camera right here, so I'm going to walk over to where everybody is. But what an emotional day! Diddy breaking down, making a statement to the court, and then breaking down as he turned to his mother to apologize to his mother. And are we good here? I think I'm going to go on the. Do you guys have me on the camera?
Yeah, we can hear you. And Lisa, we're seeing the images of him just with his hands in his face. Just what was that moment? Just kind of witnessing all of that.
It was so the whole day was so emotional. Let me switch over to the microphone here and get rid of my phone.
We see you on camera now.
So the whole day, Natasha, was really emotional because right before the lunch break early afternoon, we had the we heard from the kids. Each one of his 6 children got up and spoke to the court, and Diddy got very emotional. The kids got very emotional, and then just a short time ago, within the last hour, as everything was wrapping up here, he was allowed at the very end of it all to address. Diddy was allowed to address the court. So he got up, he stood up, and he waited a couple of minutes before he gathered his thoughts and everything, and he started apologizing to everybody. He said, I apologize to the judge, I apologize to Miss Ventura, I apologize to Jane, I apologize. And he goes, I knew better, and he admitted that. He goes, I knew better. And then he turned around to his mother. His mother was like 2 or 3 rows back, and he goes, and my mother raised me better than that. And then he kind of broke down, and then he turned around, and the kids were just all, like they were just motionless at that point. They're back in the rows and sitting there. And then he was, he did these apologies. He said that I would like another chance. I want a chance to be a father. The kids, they're very, very powerful presence. I mean, to see these 6 beautiful young people, that are all there in support of him. His mother there being very strong. They showed a video right before the lunch break also that showed him when his mother had brain surgery. He was by her side, sleeping in the hospital by her bed, feeding his mother, and it was just that part was very, very moving. But the judge, and he gave an unbelievable.
How long did he speak for, the judge, before he actually said 50 months?
He spoke for quite a bit because the judge first, and also too, there were other people that were there at the sentencing this afternoon. They had, the defense team spoke, all of those lawyers. They also brought in a reverend community activist from Miami. I think they were really hoping he'd walk out of there today and get, be in Miami this weekend, and that could, at his mansion. His mother lives in Miami, and they had the reverend spoke about, redemption, and spoke about how he was really working with people that had been formerly incarcerated. Then they had somebody the judge allowed. This is now going. We're looking at 4 o'clock here on the clock. The judge allowed them to bring in a re-entry expert, a formerly incarcerated individual, Giovanni Saris from Miami, from this first step program that he runs. And he said that yes, Mr. Combs would be a big asset to us to talk to people that are going through this whole going through imprisonment. Because also what came out, I mean, there were so many things that came out today. The number one, they were doing that because they said at MDC, which we all know how terrible the conditions are there.
Yes,
are there at MDC?
Yes, we do.
They said that he had stopped the gang violence because there'd been a tremendous amount of gang violence, as you all know, at MDC between the different factions, because that's the different gangs and the different sets run certain sections of the jail, of the detention center. So Diddy had started a 6-week business course to try and said, listen, okay, the only rule is no fighting, no stabbing. This was after.
But that goes a long way in a judge's calculation of somebody.
Well, this is all sort of critical. I want to get back to this, but let's toss it back to the studio for a moment.
And let me dial in. Yeah, let me get connected in so I can
toss it back over to you guys.
We have
all right,
so
Lisa,
much more.
Arthur, Duarte, we appreciate it, and we will check back in with you shortly. Thanks so much for your perspective on this big announcement today, of course, Diddy being sentenced to 50 months behind bars.